We do have the privilege of having some guest speakers, and they have some great information and resources they're going to walk us through and show that are going to be available in the Workbench. So today we have Amon, Haral, and Sophia. I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to them. And if you guys have questions during the presentation, feel free to throw them in the chat. We'll try to answer them as we go, or we'll just save them for the end for some Q&A. So thanks.
Hey, everyone. Thanks so much for joining. We're really excited to be here to talk with you all today. We've been working for a long time on putting together these resources, and we're so happy to have them finally available for you all. Just to get us started with a little orientation, what we plan to do is introduce the data characterization report. So that's the main topic that we are talking to you all about today. And then we'll discuss the relevance of the report for registered users, highlight a few key things, and then we'll have a live demo of the report. So I'll be providing the presentation. My name is Sophia. I've been with the DRC for a little over a year, and I work on a few different projects, but mostly things related to science analytics. And then I will let Amon and Haval give brief introductions of themselves as well.
So hello, everyone. My name is Hiral, and I'm a scientific project manager at DRC, who was also working on since over a year, and have been involved in multiple projects related to wearables, outreach, education and training initiatives, and the list goes on. And I'll pass on the mic to Amon.
Hello, my name is Amon, and I'm a data scientist here. I've been with the program for close to 4 years. I'm also on the research support team. I help with wearables, devices, and also some curation.
We are so lucky to have them. I did realize I didn't actually say my role, so I'm an IT project manager, junior to Haral, of course. But I will be leading you all through this today. So we'll go ahead and get started. We want to start with why we decided to create the data characterization report. So we really wanted to provide information to the registered users on how the data could be contextualized, characterized, and leveraged, especially as part of the complex, multifaceted, and unprecedented resource that is the AOU CDR. And this can be accessed from the researcher workbench. There are actually two main components. So there are some Jupyter notebooks that we've developed, and then there's also an article that's available on User Support Hub. We'll talk about those together as a characterization report because they are complementary resources. So to go over what the report includes, it covers characterization of the AOU cohort as a whole, including a few high-level summary statistics that are related to demographic representation and availability of data. And it also covers characterizations of participants who meet the criteria for classification as underrepresented in biomedical research. So there are a few different ways participants can be classified as UVR. We often will focus on participants that meet the criteria for at least one of those. And it also is going to include the code used to generate the reports in the form of Jupyter notebooks, like I mentioned a moment ago. This version of the report was created from the controlled tiered data. So that's 2022 Q2 R2 V6 version 6, and that was released in June of 2022. Do plan to release refreshes of this report with each data refresh. So the main text report is going to be available on the User Support Hub. Haral is going to post a link in the chat so you all can access that. That is newly publicly available. And in order to get to that report, you'll, from the homepage, want to select Working with Data. And then you'll see the data characterization and quality artifact reports. So this will be the home for each of the reports as we add additional layers. We won't be overwriting the current document. As there are new refreshes, we'll just be adding new documents so that researchers can reference the appropriate text depending on what their project requires as time passes. And then this is just a little preview of what the report looks like for you. We've really broken it down and tried to make it digestible so that you can get what you need out of it without being weighed down by lots of extra information. So we did try to keep it relatively short and very succinct. There are some appendices that make it look a little longer, but like I said, we really want it to be a digestible resource for researchers. Then the second component, like I mentioned earlier, is a featured workspace, and that contains the code and figures and tables in the form of a Jupyter notebook. So the written report covers a lot of the same topics that the Jupyter notebooks cover, but the Jupyter notebooks go a little bit more in depth. The main report pulls out the highlights and some really key considerations that researchers need to take account of when they're planning their research. So the resources do contain independent information, but they are complementary, so there is some overlap. How is this report going to be useful for registered users? So in addition to providing the methods, including the code that were used to generate the report, we also discuss, like I said, some key considerations that registered researchers need to be aware of. That includes data completeness and generalizability, to be more specific. As far as data completeness, I'm just going to run through these really quickly. It's important for researchers who wish to leverage the participant data to understand the data completeness before they start their work, throughout their work. Participants in AOU are only required to submit the primary consent and complete the basic survey to have their data included in the CDR. So that means that there are participants with a wide array of levels of completeness within the CDR. And then inclusion of other data types is totally optional, and it depends on lots of different components. And the report talks about those a little bit more in detail, at least the finer points that researchers need to be aware of. So an example for you is EHR data. So EHR data is only available for participants who are associated with a healthcare provider organization, which means that that organization has funding by the AOU program. So they're not importing data from EHR records that are not associated with AOU currently, which means that the EHR record is, I mean, in no case do we ever expect it to provide the complete record of care, but in this case especially, we don't expect it to provide the complete record of care, and we want researchers to be very aware of that. As far as generalizability, AOU oversamples the underrepresented and biomedical research categories that I mentioned earlier, and that's part of its goal to provide one of the most diverse databases in existence. Overall, we have 73% of participants that meet criteria for at least one UBR category. Demographic characteristics across participants are relatively similar, so a less than 10% difference for those who provided PPIs, so that'll be surveys. PPI is participant provided information. EHR data, physical measurements, or genomics data. However, participants who provided Fitbit data were skewed toward RBR, so those are people that are traditionally represented in biomedical research. And so that includes things like education, and they tended to be higher income. So again, there are more details about that, both in the User Support Hub article and in the Jupyter notebooks. Researchers need to be aware of these items and be cautious if their study aims to generalize findings for the US population. The AOU cohort does not accurately represent the US population, and there's some intentional oversampling of UBR, as we said, and researchers need to be cognizant of all of the different components that are going to differ from what they may or may not see in the general population. So right now we have data available from more than 372,000 participants, and about 74% of those are from underrepresented communities, and 44% are from racial and ethnic minority groups, which is something that we're really proud of, specifically related to our goal to overrepresent traditionally underrepresented populations. So this is a little high-level overview of what we have available for each of the different data types. Survey responses, we have 372,000 plus, which is absolutely amazing. Physical measurements, around 306,000. EHR records, about 258,000. Genotyping arrays, we have 165,000, a little over, which is awesome. And then whole genome sequencing, we have almost 100,000 participants with whole genome sequencing, which I personally find really exciting. I hope everyone else does too. And then as far as Fitbit data, we have a little under 13,000 Fitbit records currently. This highlights a couple of those same items, but I do want to bring those to your attention a little bit more. So again, we have 372,000 plus participants that are available in the registered for registered researchers, and then around 74% of those meet at least one UBR criteria. So that makes the AOU data set particularly well positioned to conduct research related to underrepresented groups. So there were some updates that came with the data refresh in June 2022, which included the addition of a new survey from the program's Social Determinants of Health and COVID-19 Minute Surveys, and select EHR-derived COVID-19 vaccine concepts were also unveiled within the registered tier. Again, more details on that in both the report and the Jupyter notebooks. But with that, I will conclude my presentation, and Eamon will give you a quick demo of the Jupyter notebooks.
Thanks, Sophia. Let me share my screen. Okay, so I will show you the workspace that Sophia mentioned, and that is where the notebooks with all the numbers and statistics and patterns were queried, as well as way more, so you can have an idea of the data completeness. So the workspace is published under featured workspaces, and it's under the demonstration projects. Okay, so this is the data quality report for 2022 version 6. And when you open it and go under analysis, you have 3 notebooks. The first one is a high-level summary of participants by data types. And the second one is a summary of participants by data types and demographics. So it's a little bit more granular than the first notebook. And then the third notebook is basically a UBR breakdown. Let's go through each of them in general so you have an idea of what's going on. So every notebook is structured the same way. You have information about the data set and the control tier, the access tier that was used. Like Sophia mentioned, this is the latest release, and then we're using control tier. And you have the purpose of each notebook. Here, the purpose is specifically to give you a count of participants by number of data types and also data types combinations, and to give you the code that was used for that report, not just for transparency, but so that you can also use that code in your own cohort. And then here we have a definition of the data types that are queried here, and then just an overview of the notebook structure. So the way that this notebook is written is the code is in a Python file that was saved in a bucket. And when you duplicate the workspace, it will also be in your duplicated bucket workspace. So what you do after you import all the notebooks, and you can just run this, you don't have to think about what you need to do, but this is just to go through the steps. After you import all the modules and the dataset variable, and you read it from the bucket, then you can basically import all the functions that are needed to run the report from that code, just like you would any Python module. So the first step is to get the data that we need. And for this report, we need the list of participants and whether they have a data types or not. So 1 means yes, 0 means no. And then these functions here just get you the counts and statistics for the report. And then the last part is basically a nice display of the graphs and tables. This is what the bar plot and style data frames functions do. And here you have the count of participants in the CDR by data types. For example, you can see that everybody in the CDR has at least DPI data, which is awesome. And then we have about 300,000 that have physical measurements. And this is a count of participants by number of data types. These categories are mutually exclusive. These ones are not. But this is basically people who have only 1 data types or only 2 data types, and so on and so forth. You can see that most people have provided 3 data types. And then this table is basically a more granular version of that. So you not only have the number of data types, but also what the data types are. So in this category of people with only 3 data types, you can see that the highest number are people who have both, who have EHR and physical measurement and PPI data. And in the appendix, you have the code, the same code that is in the bucket, but it's available here. If you don't want to see the code, you don't have to. You can just run everything from top to bottom. But if you are curious about how do you even get participants that have any EHR data or participants that have physical measurement, this is how. And you can use that in your own cohort and just merge it with your cohort definition. And then you have all the functions that are used for the counts and the data wrangling, and to style nicely the data frames into the plots. The second notebook follows the same structure. And this one is a count of participants by data types and demographic. And it gives you all the information and the definition that you need. And then the setup is the same. You read the code from the bucket, and then you put all the functions, and then you get the data that you need. Here we need the demographic data of each participant, as well as whether they have the data type or not. And then the report here, for example, it will stratify the self-reported race, which is in the basic survey overall for all the participants and for each of the data types. And then it gives you nice bar plots to go with it. And it goes through the same thing for ethnicity, sex at birth, gender identity, age at CDR, education, income, employment. And again, you have the appendix with all the code and the functions that are used, so you can use it in your own notebook. And the last notebook is just a simple UBR breakdown. Same structure. Here we define the UBR categories: overall, race, ethnicity, sex, SGM, age, education, income. This is sex at birth. And it tells you the UBR categories are not mutually exclusive, as you may know. So a participant can be both the UBR income and the UBR sex at birth. But the UBR and the RBR categories for each specific demographic are mutually exclusive. For example, if you're not underrepresented in biomedical research, then you have to be in the underrepresented. So if you're not a UBR sex, then you have to be an RBR sex. That's what this means. So this, again, read it from the bucket and import all the functions. And this is the nice way to get the participants and then whether they are a UBR or not. And then that's just the table to show the count and percentages as well as the bar plot. Again, you have the code available, and I think this can be very useful if you want to see in your cohort who falls in UBR or not. You can just copy paste that and then merge with your participant IDs. And then here all the code for data wrangling and just styling the report nicely. And that is it.